Hey there people, how you doing? So, it's finally time for the X70 Pro Plus review. I know it took a little while, but hey, we had a lot of photography comparisons and also the video comparison between this one and the iPhone. They're linked in the description, but for now. This phone, it is definitely a camera with a phone attached to it. We all know that's true. And essentially, what Vivo has done here is that they have upgraded the camera to a small extent. It's not huge, especially when you compare it to the X60 that came out just a few months ago. But the phone that comes with it, it's way better. It's on a whole another level compared to the X60 Pro Plus. Again, both of these phones launched in the same year, but the difference is quite mind-blowing when you look at it, especially because the pricing, the launch price at least, it remains essentially the same. So with that in mind, let's break down exactly what's so good that I find about this device. First and foremost, the design. Now, I'll be honest, I was sort of, well, let's say disheartened when I noticed that Vivo had dropped the leather finish. I was quite a big fan of that, to be honest, but you know, having held this amazing matte black or matte gray, however you want to see it, it's not very dark in color, but this texture, it is anti-fingerprint. That much I can tell you right now. Like, no matter how much you rub your hands on this, as long as you don't have actual dirt on your hands, you're never gonna get any fingerprints here or smudges. This is like a marvelous texture. That much I can tell you right now. It's got this sort of like a soft feel to it, even though it's glass. I know it's glass, but it feels almost like that very nice, almost velvety soft rubber. And bottom line, it feels amazing in the hand. That's just the point I'm trying to get across. Yes, I would have liked it to be a little bit darker to really represent black as it should be, but hey, I'm not exactly complaining for the design. It looks great, it feels amazing in the hand, and Vivo always makes beautiful smartphones, and this is no exception here. As for that little bar of glossy mirror-like finish beside the camera module, I want to say that it looks nice. It definitely helps in differentiating it from other smartphones and even previous generation of Vivo's X series smartphones, because the camera module looks exactly the same, but it also, as you'd expect, catches a lot of smudges. Now, it may just be that I hold this phone like this, and I had also mentioned this in the unboxing video that just the way I hold the phone, it sort of makes my index finger rub against the glossy area, and that part gets very smudgy. It's hard to keep clean. I'm kind of torn on this. I really like the look of it, but from a functionality standpoint, it definitely gets in the way of the texture on the lower part of the phone being so amazing. That said, let's talk about the front of the device. This is a very classic, Android flagship look. Punctual design on the center, curved glass. It looks amazing. No real complaints with design. I'm actually quite impressed that they managed to replace leather with glass while also making it feel better in the hand. That's quite a feat if you ask me. That's it. Now let's talk about the display, because this is where the upgrades begin. So previously, we had a pretty moderate display when it came to flagships and just the flagship specs that you'd expect on the X60 Pro Plus, this one's predecessor. But this time around, well, we have a decked out display. Essentially, it's 1440p, it's 120Hz, variable 120Hz at that. It's got all the HDR support, it's gotten brighter, and it has 10-bit color, which is amazing for HDR. Now, initially, I had noticed that HDR wasn't playing back properly in Netflix and Amazon Prime. That problem has been entirely fixed. I just wanted to mention that, and now it just looks amazing. It just has beautiful HDR, bright enough, like, even when you use it during the day in bright sunlight. At least I didn't have any issues while using it. It's definitely not the best or the brightest, it's not winning any awards as such, but it definitely falls under a very good flagship display category, and that's something, believe it or not, has been missing in past Vivo flagships, and I'm really glad that we finally get a real flagship display here. So now for performance, well, we actually have a Snapdragon 888 Plus in here. I think this is one of the, if not the very first phone to come out with the Plus variant of the Android flagship chipset. Now, of course, granted, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but is something, you're getting slightly better performance compared to other Android flagships, so I think that counts. And then next up, the battery life. Well, we have seen a slight increase. It's gone up from, I believe, 4200 in the X60 to 4500 on the X70 Pro Plus. That is quite an upgrade. And there is another little key factor that makes battery life on this phone not just very good, but actually pretty damn impressive. So what happens is, Vivo has a V1 chip. It's their custom ISP, and well, one of the things that it's supposed to do is that it's gonna make computational photography and all that jazz more efficient. And boy does it work. Like, I must say, when I've used this phone for a lot of photography and just throughout the day using the cameras a lot, this one's camera might be one of the most efficient ones that I've ever really used. That's honestly very impressive, especially when you've used something like the Xiaomi Mi 11 Ultra, which in general has amazing battery life, but you use the camera a lot, yeah, it's gonna tank. This is like the exact opposite, and it actually doesn't sacrifice image quality or anything like that, so that's just, impressive all the way around. Honestly, I'd expected it to be better than the X60, of course, but the fact that I've been getting like 6 to 6.5 hours consistently, whether I use the cameras or I don't, it really goes to show that the camera is, even though it is kind of considered under heavy usage, it doesn't exactly cause a lot of trouble. But of course, speaking of cameras, I think this is gonna be, the meat of the review, because as good as all the other upgrades are, like, just to name another few, we have the wireless charging now, which is amazing. Like, if you use wireless charging, you're gonna appreciate the fact that we get it in this one now. And then of course we have IP68 water and dust resistance. That certification was never really there before, and I mean, it's not like it bothered me, and maybe it's just me that I don't really care about water and dust resistance as much, but if you do, well, this flagship from Vivo, it's got it. But now, yes, back to the topic of cameras. Essentially, for the most part, I'd say this is pretty much an improvement over the X60 Pro Plus in small areas. Like, it's not the biggest deal in the world. I'd say that the X60 and the X70, in terms of photography at least, they would fall in like a similar ballpark. But there are some tendencies that you should keep in mind, especially when you consider these cameras. They have a very characteristic style. I think the best way to explain it is that the images from this phone tend to be kind of vibrant. I mean, you can turn off the software AI that'll maybe mute the colors a little, or you can turn on Zeiss color mode, which will also give you a slightly muted image, but for the most part you're gonna get bright, high contrast, and somewhat high vibrant images. And if you think about it, that is kind of reminiscent of many other Android devices, but trust me, the color processing on Vivo, it is by far my favorite. I think it renders colors like greens in leaves, and sometimes even the sky during daylight conditions, of course, really well, and it's got some of the most accurate white balance that I've seen in a long time. Like, it's impressive stuff, no doubt about that. In daylight, most phones are amazing. When it comes to portraits, however, well, I think you're gonna either love it or you're gonna hate it. That's just how it is. I personally feel like this is the greatest portrait camera for me, because I think that when I use this phone with plain up portrait mode, that's one of the Zeiss portrait modes that you can choose in the camera app itself, it works insanely well for me. Like, the skin tones are really well rendered. I mean, accuracy, it's not always perfect, but the amount of contrast that it gives to the skin, and sometimes it doesn't quite fare well, it's not 100% consistent, but I must say, majority of the results that I get, I'm way more pleased than I would have expected, especially because coming from the X60 Pro Plus, which had a tendency to desaturate skin tones, this is a welcome change. And honestly, I would highly recommend trying out the different Zeiss, portrait modes that we get, and you'll probably find something that you're gonna like a lot. For me, it was planar mode, of course. And well, next up is night mode. And it's interesting because Vivo has really good night mode, but well, the thing is that it's not very realistic or natural, because most of the time what happens is that the X70 will try to give you a very bright, very high contrast, very sharp and very clean image. Now the last two things, I'm all about that, but The brightness and the high contrast, well, I do like high contrast in my images, that's been pretty apparent lately. But, you know, the brightness, I'm kind of torn, but even so, I still believe in the fact that if you have a brighter image at night, it's always good because, if you want a darker scene, you can just lower the exposure in post and you're gonna get either the same image quality or slightly better, because lowering the exposure would mean that you're gonna reduce noise in the shadows naturally. But to be honest, of course, I realize that not a lot of people want super bright night mode images. They want it to look dark, look like the scene and give us a natural outcome. That I wouldn't say is the case with the X70 Pro Plus. Especially when it comes to like ultra wide night mode, it tends to brighten things up a lot. But hey, that said, the ultra wide night mode on this camera is definitely the best when it comes to just the raw quality of the photos that you can get. I mean, I compared this one to the S21 Ultra with the ultra wide, and in ultra low light situation, I remember this one distinctly. The S21 took a 5-second exposure, this one took a 2-second one and produced a slightly more detailed and way more bright image. And of course, was the situation really as bright as the photo indicated from the X70? Not really, but the quality of the image that I got there, it was really something to behold, especially when you tie in the fact that it took a 2-second exposure compared to 5 or maybe 6 seconds on the S21. I don't exactly remember, you can check out the comparison of course. The X70 is not just a good camera, it has a lot of interesting features like night mode styles. If you haven't seen night mode styles, man. I must say, I think this is my favorite set of cameras for 2021. Yeah, it's not the most natural, but it's definitely produced some of the most stylized images that I've ever seen, and that really speaks to me. At least that's my opinion. Now, whether you like it or not, that's going to depend entirely on you. And now for videography. Well, we have some improvements here. Definitely, we have seen a lot of places like HDR, exposure balance, and even white balance, which have improved in general, especially when it comes to 4K 30, and even some parts of 4K 60 have improved. I compared it to the iPhone 13 Pro, which at the moment is considered to be one of the, if not the best, for video. And yeah, white balance was actually better on the X70 Pro Plus, spoiler alert. Of course, if you want all the details, check out the comparison. I know I've said that about a billion times already, but hey, that's just the case. That said, there is a problem on the X70 Pro Plus. It sort of lacks detail, like quite a bit, and I remember distinctly that not being a problem on the X60 Pro Plus. So the interesting part here is that the X60 had really good detail, but was lacking in places like, good HDR or maybe proper contrast and exposure balance. All of those places have improved. All the downsides have now been hashed out and smoothened out, but the one place where the X60 was good, well, the X70 suffers in that exact region, and I'm not really sure why. Is it just a bug? Can it be fixed with the software update? I'm not entirely sure. If it can be, man, I'd be glad, because, at that point, I think this would be my pick for basically the all-round amazing camera of the year, especially because I'm so much into photography. And of course, for someone who cares more about videos and doesn't necessarily need extensively amazing photos that you can get from this device, I'm pretty sure that you're not even considering this device then. But yeah, essentially what I feel is that if this phone had slightly better details, not slightly, quite a bit better details, I'm not sure why it has such low detail preservation in video, but if it did, this would be a very apt device for video. It wouldn't be the best out there, not by a long shot, but it would be very good. It'd be probably top tier flagship level. That's basically what I've been focusing on, because the rest of the phone has been upgraded in such a manner such that the cameras are the main focus, but the rest of the phone, yeah, this is a really good flagship that you're getting along with it. Oh, and I think I did not mention that we get stereo speakers this time around, man. I cannot tell you how glad I am to get stereo speakers finally on the Vivo flagships. It's been missing so far, and it was one of my biggest complaints because I tend to watch a lot of content on these phones, and not having stereo speakers, it can be quite a hassle to always reach for earbuds. And to be honest, the stereo speakers aren't the best in the world. I think that's kind of expected, but hey, will this get the job done? Damn right it will. So, with all of that said, I think the only thing left is software. It's largely unchanged compared to the X60 Pro Plus. So essentially you get a pretty clean look. Some bloatware is always there. I mean, you can't really do anything about that unless you're using a Google Pixel. But yeah, essentially get rid of the bloatware, disable it, uninstall it. It takes like 10 minutes, maybe 15. And then once you're done, well, you have a lot of customizations. Like it's a very well-rounded device. I'd say it's very similar to the OnePlus 9 Pro with Oxygen OS. Like, you get some really nice customizations, but for the most part, it is a very clean look. Although there is one complaint. We are missing a lot of live wallpapers on the X70 Pro Plus, especially when you compare it to the X60 Pro Plus, which had quite a few of them. I know it's a weird complaint, but even so, I always appreciate good wallpapers. But taking them away from me, now that's just rude. But anyways, jokes aside, I think this is a great device. I think this is an amazing flagship. It has some issues here and there, definitely not perfect. I mean, which device is, right? But still, I think this thing gets the job done. I think this is finally a true flagship from Vivo that, of course, excels in camera in my opinion. It has a very stylized look, and if you're into that style, that high contrast, then yeah, you're gonna have a blast with this one. And the best part is that it holds true even when you're not using the camera, because the rest of the device is phenomenal. So with that said, I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, do hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be seeing you guys later. Cheers.